how much are we completely free to shape this destiny versus how much do we feel like this experience has been kind of preordained for the whatever our soul wanted to experience and has encountered us with maybe some more difficulties than others or more ease than others, but
Yeah.
having the freedom to kind of maybe change that path if you feel like you want to change that path, but then that seems to be back to, oh, well, that's what I want, and that's missing the
Yes.
point again. So I feel like I'm kicking myself here, Peter.
No, you're doing a great job. I have to say, there's not many hosts who could keep up with this level of eloquence. So I appreciate that and acknowledge you for being able to articulate it that well. So
And my ego is very grateful for the validation. Thank you.
I'm just keeping the eye around it a little longer for you. I'm actually doing you a disservice. No, I would say it's both, right? The way that I say, the way I tend to phrase it is that, we're here to transcend the constraints with which we arrived is the opportunity that it is to be human. So oftentimes we'll ascribe our struggles today in middle management, a divorce for the second time, no money, sickness because our parents were assholes or whatever, and this is a victim mindset, right? Where we're at the effect of what happened to us. And that's not the narrative that I subscribe or that I wish to help people understand. Rather, you are a soul that you got entangled with whatever fears and constraints that you did. And so you will curate the events that you need in this lifetime to be able to break free. The only sort of quote unquote co-creation part, as far as I'm concerned, is to what degree are you ready to let go? Because as I said earlier, the ego's number one imperative is to be right. And so it's almost like the pain of suffering living within the prison of the constraint has to at some point outweigh the pain of discipline of change, right? And until that happens, people tend to stay in their comfort zones, albeit their comfort zones are discomforting, if you really get it. And that could use any forms of escape, right? Prescribed medication, street medication, weed, alcohol, sex, food. There's nowadays, sadly, for humans, going back to my point earlier about the number of choices, the paralysis that can come through choice fatigue. We have a myriad of ways of placating our pain, right? And so sadly, it can prolong this emancipation and liberation opportunity, but it's both, right? Meaning we are beneficiaries of life, not victims of it. And simultaneously, whether we can recall it or not, my assertion is that as souls, we did sort of sign up for whatever it is appropriate in this lifetime that we're ready to face in order to emancipate ourselves from these unconscious prisons. So the good news is you can't fuck it up.
Yes.
You
That's
can't
all.
fuck it
That's
up.
all we want to hear, Peter. It's
Yeah.
gonna be okay. This is the answer I was looking for from the beginning.
It's that beautiful meme, right? It says it all works out in the end. If it hasn't worked out, it's not the end.
Yeah. Well, no,
So the
although
question is, to what degree do we sustain suffering versus go headlong into the fear and constraint, right? And I guess that's really my point is, I personally, having done this now for so long, work with some of the greatest performers around the world, have learned that the greatest access to freedom is ironically constraint. And constraint can come in many forms, like true limitation, whether it be physical, financial, psychological, but certainly more, it tends to be emotional. And so wherever we feel some sort of limitation, the opportunity is not to negate it or numb it or deny it or disprove it, but really inquire into why do I feel this fear? Why do I feel this upset? And to use that as access to discovering on the other side of it that actually it's a lie and that beneath the constraint, who I am at my core is nothing but freedom, power, love, vitality, all of these qualities that I'm looking for.
yes, hell yes.
Hell yeah, baby. If you're into that kind of shit, which I personally
100%. Which is why I'm very lit up now. So forget the tired
you're like,
Jason at the
forget
beginning.
about-
I'm leaning into this.
tired,
Which
schmired.
I'm gonna ask you. I don't know. This is a controversial question, but I'd be curious to know: do you see things happening or being shared and accepted as a truth in the kind of spiritual community that you find does more harm than good? And it's kind of like, oh, you're like, oh God, why is this being perpetuated? It's probably holding us back more.
Do I see things happening, or say again? So repeat the
Have you
question.
noticed like sort of like an accepted as truth in the spiritual field that actually is holding people back way more? And it's kind of like, oh, it's frustrating to see that this keeps being repeated, but it's being interpreted either the wrong way or it's just downright not helping us in any way.
Oh, a particular theme that I might notice in
Yeah,
someone,
yeah.
you mean? Yeah,
No, as
sometimes.
well, I was gonna say in a theme from like, if you're hearing people saying, you know, I'll give you an example. I've had a guest,
Please.
and I'm not gonna quote him, and it's been a long time, that they would say like, when you're facing a decision between your goals and your feelings, ignore your feelings. And
Gotcha.
for some people,
Right.
they would have a stance saying like, this is absolutely not true. But there's a lot of things that get shared by a lot of different people, and
Yes.
some of them, I'm sure you have a stance against, being like, actually, this is probably not right.
Yeah. Yes, I get what you're saying now. And again, I first want to, put the disclaimer that I'm also human, right? And I don't want to, for any intents and purposes, come across as, oh, well, Peter Crone is the gospel. The way I would put it is, we're all doing the best we can within the limits of the awareness that we currently have, right? So my awareness today is far more expanded than it was 20 years ago, and even more so perhaps 15, and 10 years ago, where it's more refined. It might not be so dramatic, but it's more subtle. And so I for sure can hear other thought leaders and spiritual teachers out there in the world who I could definitely, from my own personal perspective, go, okay, that's not actually true, but I could see why they're saying it, because they'll probably get a lot of credit card numbers. But, I love quotes, right? You may know that, I write in quotes, I share quotes. It's going to be the main format of my first book that I'm working on. And I'll say, there's no greater debt collector than karma. And so even if somebody is quote unquote wrong done by somebody where it feels like an injustice, sure, the go-to is what? Revenge and bitterness and anger. And, that's okay. Sometimes it's appropriate, depends what happened. But for the most part, that only creates more disease in yourself, right? And so I tend to trust that there's such a divine intelligence out there that if somebody needs to speak derogatory of me, which fortunately doesn't seem to happen anyway, but as an example, or somebody were to steal something from me, I'm like, look, first of all, if they really need it more than me, have at it. And secondly, the karma will take care of the consequences of your actions. So that's where I don't have to, this little old me, feel like I need to control the circumstances of everybody else's life. Which a lot of people tend to do. And, many of your listeners might go, holy shit, I'm trying to control everything and everyone around me, my spouse, my children, my parents, my boss, and it's like, I let people be who they are. I speak my truth as authentically as I can. And I trust that whether you believe in God, Allah, Krishna, or whoever, they'll take care of the details.
Thank you so much for listening to the Selling with Love podcast. We have some previous episodes you can tune into right here. And if you prefer the short form content where you get to the point in under 10 minutes, we do have a ton of clips from our best episodes that are being shared on this channel as well. So pick which one supports you the most. And of course, thank you for liking, subscribing, and of course, selling with love.